Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode we're sailing out to a new Tier IV Japanese aircraft carrier known as the Hosho, in a Tier IV domination game on the map Strait. The purpose of today's video is a continuation of our theme for 2018 of improving our abilities as an aircraft carrier player, whereby instead of continuing up the American line, having just reached the Tier 7 American aircraft carrier known as the Ranger, I thought I'd switch to the Japanese tech tree so that way I can better understand how the Japanese aircraft carriers play, at least at the low to mid tiers, and on top of that get to know my enemy from both perspectives, i.e. when I'm sailing the Americans versus the Japanese and the Japanese against the Americans. The purpose of this game in particular is to show how I'm coming to grips with the concept of cross-dropping and how the flavour of the Japanese aircraft carriers plays out in what proves to be a rather tense match, as we'll see. Now my opening game plan is to exploit the setup of the Hosho, whereby I have one fighter squadron and two torpedo bomber squadrons, compared to say the Langley's 1-1-1, one fighter, one torpedo bomber, one dive bomber. Now I know I can't win a straight up dogfight against the enemy Langley's aircraft, or if I do it's purely through a 50-50 chance. So instead I'm going to be using my fighters as a scouting tool and a harassment tool against the enemy bombers if they're exposed at a given point in time, as the situation demands it. Initially I'm going for the scout into the southeastern corner of the map. I want to know what elements of the enemy fleet are making their way towards Objective Charlie, and I'm moving my torpedo bombers up towards, at first, either side of Charlie. One to the north of it, one to the south of it, to create a cross pattern. But very shortly, noticing the smoke going up towards the enemy team, and the fact they've got a consolidation of a Wyoming and two Tier IV French cruisers known as the Dug H1, I've decided instead to focus on the enemy Azislav that's decided to make its way as quickly as possible towards Objective Bravo. Now while my torpedo bombers is a little bit behind, but Squadron 3 here, as we'll see, is right on point, and it means my fighters can spot the Azislav and we can catch the Azislav off guard here, whereby they're trying to make their way through a small avenue towards Objective Bravo. The torpedo bombers will get there just in time to cut them off, and the Azislav has had their manoeuvrability options taken away. They either go forward, cut their speed into the path of our torpedoes, or turn into our torpedoes, and either way they're most likely going to take at least one torpedo hit. As our follow-up squadron, Squadron 4 makes its way in, and we've clipped the bow of the Azislav with a torpedo, also forcing them to use up their repair, so that way they haven't got the flooding continuing on their ship. Unfortunately, our secondary drop is not going to hit the target. We dropped it on parallel to the path of the Azislav as they were coming around the rock, but what we have forced them to do is activate a smoke and put themselves in a rather unfavourable position, whereby they've got less than half health, they're way too close to our friendly fleet, and they're cut up in a smoke screen and well apart from their own team. Mean they haven't got the ability to play the way they want to now, instead they are playing the way our team wants them to, and it means their life has become rather difficult. In the meantime, noticing that the enemy fleet is really pushing as a cluster towards Objective Charlie, and in particular the Wyoming is going to shred our planes if we stay there too long, we're opting now to move our eyes, i.e. our fighters, up towards Bravo. Now in the meantime you can see on the minimap that both of the enemy aircraft carriers, the Hosho and the Langley, have consolidated forces and pushed towards the northwestern corner. They're focusing on our Hosho in particular. In return, I realise at this point I cannot go up there to join the fight, because if I do, my fighters will arrive too late, and it means that the two squadrons of enemy fighters up there will be able to bully me out the skies. So instead I'm favouring subtlety. I'm going to be providing vision for the time being over Bravo, and now I'm moving my fighters up towards the southern flank of the enemy aircraft carrier squadrons. The logic here being that the enemy aircraft carriers probably don't actually realise my fighters are still down here. They've probably got no idea where they are because they're so focused on what's going up in the northwest. So instead I'm going to use my torpedo bombers to provide threat over Bravo against those enemy destroyers, and move my fighters up to catch the Hosho's torpedo bomber squadrons off guard as they're retreating back. And notice how I'm timing it. I'm going to be intercepting those torpedo bombers just as they're passing over our friendly Kaiser, the Tier IV German battleship which has a decent AA suite, meaning that at least one torpedo bomber squadron is not going to be making it home. And in return, if the enemy aircraft carriers fighters want to attack me, they'll have to do it over my fleet, and therefore compromise their ability to have an advantage with our fleet-based anti-aircraft batteries conferring an equality to our squadron. Now in the meantime I'm trying to pick on the enemy Azislav here, but I make the mistake of rotating the auto drop of Squadron 4, i.e. the secondary torpedo bomber squadron, meaning I'm going to miss this cross drop because the secondary squadron came in a little bit too late. But on the plus side we have managed to wipe out one of the torpedo bomber squadrons, much to the frustration by the looks of things of the enemy aircraft carriers fighters. As we go to pursue initially the other torpedo bomber squadron, we realise they're getting too far away, so instead, as we move our carrier up down the western avenue, I'll explain more on this in a minute, I'll be turning my fighters around to avoid losing them against the enemy Svetlana, and instead looking up towards our fleet and noticing the enemy Hosho fighters which are located behind it. And what I'm going to do is go for them and lock them up over our Kaiser. As the enemy Hosho makes their way over to take us on, this is going to work to our advantage, where the consolidated A of a Kaiser, Akuma, Adane and our own fighters going together against the enemy fighter squadron, and we'll win this dogfight. Now in the meantime, as I relocate, what is there to note about the relocation abilities of the Hosho? Well, they're significantly better than the Langley, your American counterpart at Tier 4, whereby your top speed here is 25 knots, your rudder shift is 7.9 seconds, and your turn circle radius is 740 meters. This means that you can relocate rapidly, and thanks to your detectability by sea being 8.6 kilometers or 8.1 kilometers by air, you're quite a stealthy carrier, meaning that you can sit right under the radar of a good number of enemy ships out in open water. I'm taking my time and moving up the Western Avenue because I actually do want to try and bait one of the enemy cruisers, i.e. one of the two French cruisers, into following us up the Western Avenue onto the path of our torpedo bombers, as we'll see later, and potentially waste away their life and waste away their time, because I do not want them to move up into the centre of the map, because that's where the fight will be won. And whilst our team at first seemed to be quite behind in this engagement, the score is looking roughly even at the moment because we've won out the north, although we are suffering from a cap disadvantage, i.e. 2-1, having just captured A. Now in the meantime, looking at the Wakataki here, we're going for a cross drop, attacking from both sides, one squadron coming in from what effectively is their east, and the other squadron coming in from where's effectively the north. The logic here being that if we don't catch them with the northern set, we'll catch them with the eastern set, as we come in at a 90-degree angle between the two sets of torpedoes. Perpendicular is the word here, and hopefully we'll strike one torpedo, and that will enable us to take away most of the Wakataki's health. And it looks as though we were successful, whereby we take away practically all their health, 7,812 of it. That means that Wakataki now is in a really awkward position, as we keep one of our torpedo bomb squadrons behind to keep them spotted, and our Kuma fishes them off. Now what's worth noting is that the maximum torpedo damage of our bombers is 8,567, which means we can't one-shot torpedo an enemy destroyer typically, instead we will need multiple torpedo hits. So the idea is to get the enemy torpedoes down to a health state whereby they're no longer able to be advantageous to their team, i.e. being able to push forward, being able to actually tank a couple hits, instead they have to play much more conservatively. They can't be daring anymore because they don't have the health to do so. And remember earlier I said about potentially baiting while the French cruisers are away? Well, one of them's pursuing us right now, and we're sending our torpedo bomber squadrons once they've reloaded, with their reload time of 14 seconds, thanks to the combination of aircraft servicing expert, the Tier 1 captain skill, and the torpedo armament expertise Tier 3 captain skill. We'll be able to get these bombers up nice and rapidly and set up another cross drop. In the meantime, my fighters, not really using them for much at the moment with their low ammunition available to them, so instead we're just holding them back. We don't want to put them on the carry yet because we need to make sure our bombers are able to get up. So instead, bringing the torpedo bombers on at the moment, I'm not going to be pushing in until both are ready. I need to do this simultaneously to guarantee a wipeout, or as close as possible guarantee a wipeout on the Dugotuan. So bringing in squadron number 4 as well. Squadron 3's waiting on the western periphery, and squadron 4's coming in from the north. We're going to rinse and repeat exactly what we did with Akataki. Squadron 4 goes in, and as the cruiser turns to their right, our other squadron goes in, and it looks as though we're bringing our AA to bear on the enemy torpedo bombers. We strike one torpedo, and then from the secondary squadron we strike with 2, and that's them out the game. But the job's not done yet. If you're wondering why I'm focusing a little bit on bringing my AA to bear against the enemy torpedo bombers, well, it does have 3.1 kilometer range, and we've got 30 damage per second once we've upgraded our hull, which means that we can take out the occasional aircraft. And by staying close to the landmass, which is off to our effective, what would be our starboard side, it means that we don't have to worry about being dropped from the south, based on our relative orientation at the moment. Now with the enemy French cruiser out the way, and noticing that our team has preferred to take a route which goes down the eastern side of the map to pursue the enemy carriers and the enemy Miyogi, instead what we're going to be doing is focusing towards the centre once more, because that is where the action needs to eventually go to if our team wants to win this match, because of the capture point in the centre and the fact that it controls a number of avenues around the map. We lose our Izuzuchi to a detonation on the enemy Langley, and we bring our fighters around to attack the torpedo bomber squadron, which isn't active anymore, what are the loss of the enemy Hosho, but it's providing spotting on our Kaiser. And having eliminated that squadron, we've now narrowed down the number of people who can be spotting. But a little bit of a surprise behind us, a Fararang has come up right behind us, the Pan-Asian Tier 3 destroyer from what I recall. And whilst we were reversing initially, we've now put ourselves into forwards acceleration, and that means we're going to duke the incoming deep water torpedoes by a very small margin. And note here how I'm going to prey on this enemy destroyer, much like I did with the Azislav earlier. I've got 2 torpedo bomber squadrons here, That enemy destroyer has barely any AA whatsoever, and they're very close to a landmass. By doing that, they've already limited their manoeuvrability options, and I want to try and score a torpedo hit to wipe them out of the game or get them on as low a health as possible as they go to smoke. We cross-drop them very close to the landmass here, coming in one set of torpedo bombers from the north, which they turn to avoid, but our other set of torpedoes coming in from the west, they may not be able to avoid because it looks as though they're going to end up beaching themselves on the landmass here, and they indeed do so. And as our torpedoes drift in towards the target, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. And there we go, we get a torpedo hit, which actually leaves them on just shy of 0 health once more, roughly 76 if I remember correctly. And our fighters in the meantime are taking on the enemy fighter squadron over in the northeastern side of the map, getting out of the way to avoid them spotting for the enemy team. And we're starting to run away from the destroyer that's coming up on R6, who's going to be quite infuriated with their loss of health. Now we're not as fast as the destroyer, but we're pulling a good amount of ground and timing our positioning so that way the Wyoming does not provide spotting us for the enemy destroyer to shoot at us I should say, through the spotting of their Wyoming, i.e. using their smoke screen to keep them covered from return fire. I'm sending my torpedo bomber squadrons behind me to spot when the destroyer is going to pursue and just holding back from coming around the corner onto Bravo too quickly so that way the Wyoming does not have the ability to shoot at us or spot us for the destroyer in return. Also using the torpedo bombers as a scout for any incoming torpedoes. But noting that the enemy Wyoming is a very good position against our friendly Kaiser, I sent one torpedo bomber squadron to try and take them out of the game. But then I realised that whatever the situation right now, I have to make a decision, and I'm constantly going back and forth trying to decide what to do. And I decided at the very last moment we've got to send those torpedo bombers in to help out our friendly Kaiser, because they're going to be much more useful for the time being compared to us trying to take down one destroyer. Now we drop one torpedo directly on the top of our Kaiser, doing no damage, but in return it's not going to sail to the target, but we do score a torpedo hit towards the rear of the Wyoming, which takes off enough of their health, enabling our Kaiser to finish them off and take them out of the game. And in return now we have one torpedo bomber squadron which we can use, still i.e. it has torpedoes available, but noting that the enemy destroyer is actually drifting away from us, we're going to keep making our way southwards towards the enemy Miyogi, and in the meantime reload our other torpedo bomber squadron. Here the intention is to use our concealment in order to position ourselves in such fashion whereby the enemy destroyer loses sight of us as we make our way southwards, and in return the Miyogi is not going to see us in open water until we get too close to them. Alternatively, we try to get towards the landmass just a little bit south of us. It's getting a bit awkward at this point because we have lost a considerable amount of health. I have our standard 31,800 HP pool, and with our armour ranging between 6 to 20mm, we don't have enough armour to be a sponge high explosive for too long. We send in one torpedo bomber squadron because we're thinking that we may lose all of our health and be taken out of the game, so we're starting to throw in as much ammunition as possible to try and bring down the enemy fleet. We scored 2 torpedo hits on the Miyogi, and we send in our other squadron once again, keep an eye on what's going on behind us, trying to re-angle our carrier to get away from that enemy destroyer. It means that we come in at a bit of an awkward angle on the Miyogi with our second set of torpedo bombers, but it looks as though they're going to get the job done, striking with at least one, and with the Miyogi being on just over 5,000 health, it's enough to get them out of the game. Unfortunately, at this point we get set on fire by the Farang, and it's too late for us because we're not running the premium consumables, meaning that we're not going to be able to put out that fire before we die, unless our Kuma manages to take that destroyer out to wrap up the game. But as you can see, they're trying to shoot blind over a landmass on the enemy destroyer, so what we do as a last resort is we position as many planes as we've got over the top of that destroyer to provide continuous spotting. That way, they're not going to be able to hide away and potentially ambush our Kuma, but instead fall victim to their guns when the time is right. As we now sink, and we're just going to wait for our team to clear up, whether it being a 4 versus 1 and that enemy destroyer being in a very disadvantageous position, and noting that our planes spotted the incoming torpedoes from the destroyer towards our friendly Kuma. Another usage of scouting with your planes. So we're just going to switch over to the Kuma's perspective here. Shouldn't be too long before they take them out, we hope. And there we go, game over. So in what was a rather closely fought match, we can see our battle performance amounted to a total damage output of 65,637 HP. Coming on to the team scores, we can see that we topped our team in terms of base experience earned with 1,377. Whilst our overall output at the start of the match was rather limited, more confined to scouting and providing our team with the ability to gradually gain map control where possible, over the course of the game our damage output increased dramatically. Not in terms of overall HP of damage dealt, but in terms of the relative percentage of damage that we dealt to the ships we targeted. In particular, the Wakataki and the Flyerang lost 99% of their total health pools through a singular torpedo strike thanks to our usage of cross drops. this meaning that we were able to effectively put them out of the game by forcing them to take a playstyle that was much more conservative, as outright aggression would only get them killed by a single over-penetration of armour piercing or a single high explosive strike. And by forcing destroyers to lose their ability to act confidently, we're able to help our team stay in the match, as it did look as though at one point we were going to be defeated rather early on. We also have to factor in our usage of our fighters to gradually harass enemy aircraft, taking out a full set of Hosho fighters over our own fleet, using the position of our fleet and our fighters in tandem in order to gain the advantage. Coming on to our detailed report, I have one key item that I would personally like to raise, and it's why my opinions concern the Hosho. Looking at the other category for damage, the 3 floods we caused only dealt 1,201 damage in total. Now for a ship whose squadrons are focused around torpedo bombers, you would expect that number to be higher. But what one has to consider is the fact that when you're going for a cross drop, you're bringing both sets of torpedo bombers to play at the same time, meaning that any floods you cause will be counteracted by the fire extinguisher of the enemy ship if it's available. Now if I was saying the Langley, I could send in the dive bombers first, cause a fire, expect my opponent to put that fire out, and then come in with my torpedo bombers to set a subsequent flooding, or vice versa. With the Hosho, if I were to do that by myself, I'd have to send in the first set of torpedo bombers on the expectation of a flood being caused, and then send in the second set later, meaning that I throw away my ability to cross-drop and do a larger amounts of damage with a limited number of planes in my squadron, I4 compared to the Langley 6. This is one of the things that I'm trying to get around in the ship, and I'll start to look forward to getting around with the Zuho at Tier 5, where it gets access to dive bombers as well as torpedo bombers. And I personally feel if you really want to maximise your damage output in the Hosho, you'll need to be squadded up alongside a teammate who's going to focus on setting fires and burning away the fire extinguisher consumables of your opponent, so that way you can score the floodings with your torpedo bombers in the cross drops and deal maximum damage. Alternatively, just watching the situation of enemy ships as your teammates, or your random teammates in the match, cause fires and floods and your opponents are forced to put them out. And finally, in terms of the credits and experience we earned, we can see that after deductions and additions, we walked to have 181,913 silver credits and 2,128 commander experience. To conclude, I personally feel today's gameplay has been a powerful demonstration of the cross-dropping capability afforded to Japanese aircraft carriers, starting with the Hosho at Tier 4. In this gameplay in particular, we were able to make our torpedo bombers do good work with the cross-dropping capability by crippling 2 enemy destroyers in particular and doing significant damage to other enemy ships. Whereby we also vented one of our key frustrations with this configuration, i.e. 2 torpedo bombers rather than a combination of torpedo bombers and dive bombers as afforded to your American counterpart the Langley, in not being able to inflict bleed effects that stick for a long duration, as typically when we send both of our bombers in, the floods we cause we nullify by fire extinguishers available to the enemy fleet. I mean, we're more reliant on fielding ourselves with division mates, alternatively watching what our team do, and when they set fires or cause floods, watching for those items to be put out by the enemy fleet before going in our attack runs. But nonetheless, we made the Hosho work today and helped our team come back from the jaws of defeat by the usage of the cross-drop comeback. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. And if you haven't already started playing this game, as it's a free-to-play game, why not do so today, as I thoroughly enjoy it, and I'm sure you will too if you enjoyed this video. If you want to sign up for the game, be sure to use the link in the description. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, as always, take care and fair seas.